For many, Tekken 2 was the moment 3D fighting games went from being an arcade novelty to a global obsession. It had cinematic character endings, a soundtrack that thumped like a nightclub, and visuals that made the PlayStation look light years ahead of anything else at the time. It was the game that defined what a sequel should be: faster, flashier, and infinitely cooler. But while millions were being blown away by Namco's cutting-edge masterpiece, a strange parallel world existed, one where players claimed to be enjoying Tekken 2, but rather on the Sony PlayStation, it was instead on the NES. Yes, that's right. As ridiculous as it sounds, the same 8-bit console that could barely handle scrolling backgrounds was somehow running a version of one of the most advanced fighters of the 90s. So with that said, join me today as we examine the history of this ridiculous conversion of a game. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the illegal version of Tekken 2 for the NES. Yeah! Fighting games, they're bloody brilliant, aren't they? And what's really cool is that as of now you can experience all of the classic Marvel vs. Capcom sprite-based brawlers together in one epic collection of modern hardware. Even better, using my links you can grab it for a whopping 54% off the usual price. And while you're there, don't miss out on discounts up to 90% on thousands more games, including many of the big fighting game releases of this era. So treat yourself, click my links below and enjoy the rest of this video. Imagine, if you will, attempting the impossible, taking a cutting-edge, fully three-dimensional PlayStation fighting game and forcing it to exist on the humble 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. No license from Namco, no access to their hardware, and certainly no permission slip signed by the great gods of Sony. Most sane individuals would have dismissed the very notion as lunacy, an act of technical heresy so preposterous that it borders on the absurd. Yet in the chaotic bootleg underbelly of the mid-90s in Taiwan, such madness was simply another day at the office. Here, a plucky team of unlicensed programmers known as Hummer Team embarked upon one of the most astonishing feats in the history of video game piracy, a full-blown remake of Tekken for the NES, cheekily titled Tekken 2. It was an idea so bold it should have resulted in spontaneous combustion, yet somehow, against all logic, the blasted thing actually worked. Load up the cartridge and you're greeted by a vision so wrong it's almost right. A world where Kazuya Mishima lumbers about in 8-bit glory, trading blows inside a flat, flickering arena while the poor NES wheezes desperately under the strain. It's crude, clunky, and yet undeniably mesmerizing, like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat made of broken circuit boards. Yet, amusingly, this madness exists. When the original Tekken first erupted onto the arcade scene in 1994, it was a declaration of the future. Built upon Namco's System 11 hardware, which itself was powered by the same architecture that would soon become the PlayStation, Tekken marked the moment when the industry fully crossed into the realm of true three-dimensional combat. Fighters no longer existed as flat collections of sprites. They were sculpted from hundreds of polygons, rendered dynamically in real time and capable of sidestepping each other in fully realized 3D arenas. It was a spectacle of flashing lights, metallic textures, and angular limbs that felt almost impossibly futuristic for the mid-90s. As Edge magazine wrote in its June 1995 issue, praising the PlayStation's uncanny replication of Namco's arcade original, for once a home system can boast an identical conversion of a cutting-edge coin-op. That line perfectly encapsulated the sense of wonder surrounding Tekken at the time, a sense that makes Hummer Team's bootleg version all the more unbelievable. Now contrast that with the NES, a console that first reached store shelves in 1983, powered by a processor that ticked along at a humble 1.79 MHz and capable of displaying just 56 colours. It couldn't render a single polygon, it could only stitch together tiny 8x8 titles to create its worlds. The gulf between the two machines wasn't just large, it was absurd. To even attempt a Tekken port on such hardware would be like performing open heart surgery with a spoon, and yet that is precisely what Hummer Team set out to do. To understand how this miracle of madness came to be, we must first step into the world of Hummer Cheng, the elusive founder of Taiwan's most infamous bootleg studio. Cheng began his career at Satchen, a prolific unlicensed developer responsible for more than 70 games across the NES and Famicom. After cutting his teeth in that chaotic environment, he departed in 1992 to form his own band of rogue programmers in Taipei. What emerged was a team of roughly 13 individuals, a small army of uncredited geniuses, including Silver Lin and Kathy Chen, As the documentary Bootleg Kings, the unlicensed games of Hummer Team recounts, at their peak Hummer Team would work on 2 games at the same time, occasionally 3, with turnaround on their projects averaging around 4 months. This was no leisurely operation, but a feverish production house where deadlines were measured in weeks, not quarters. Yet from that relentless pace came some of the most extraordinary unauthorized conversions ever to grace the Famicom. Their debut, Jingqi Jingzhuan, was a surprisingly competent role-playing game, their only attempt in the genre, published by Supertone Electronics. It drew heavily from Dragon Quest, complete with clunky Chinese text that scrolled across the screen like ticker tape. This modest beginning, however, was merely a warm-up. Later that same year, they unleashed their unlicensed adaptation of Street Fighter II: The World Warrior, and in doing so built a fighting engine that will power nearly every Hummer Team game to follow. By 1993, Hummer Team had grown both bolder and stranger. They released Kart Fighter, a completely unauthorized crossover in which characters from Super Mario Kart abandoned their vehicles and began pummeling each other in 2-dimensional combat years before Super Smash Bros. The following year brought Samari, their most infamous creation, a bizarre mashup in which Mario himself invaded Sonic's world sprinting through Green Hill Zone. It was broken, notorious and technically remarkable all at once. Within just a few years, Hummer Team had developed a cult reputation. Their games were unlicensed, often nonsensical and riddled with errors, but they were also feats of raw technical ingenuity. These were not lazy cash grabs churned out for profit, but acts of creative rebellion against the limits of the hardware. They were, in every sense of the phrase, the Michelangelos of piracy, producing technically sophisticated remakes on shoestring budgets, completing 2 or even 3 games a year, all in open defiance of the rules. This defiant spirit would soon lead them to their most outrageous challenge yet, recreating Tekken on the NES. Rather than attempt genuine 3D, they converted Tekken's polygonal fighters into hand-crafted 2-dimensional sprite sheets, with each frame of animation painstakingly rendered as a flat image. What had once been sculpted models became crude yet recognizable 8-bit caricatures, stored as hundreds of tiny tiles within the cartridge. To recreate the illusion of depth, Hummer Team engineered multi-layer backgrounds that scrolled at different speeds, a trick known as parallax scrolling. On a console never built to perform such feats, the result was astonishingly effective. To achieve all of this, Hummer Team built Tekken 2 upon the foundations of their earlier Street Fighter II engine, a decision born not of laziness but of sheer practicality. It allowed them to focus their limited time on character animation, stage design, and gameplay tweaks rather than reinventing the wheel for each new project. And ambition was precisely what set Hummer Team apart. Even Nintendo's own first-party developers had needed the Super FX chip, an additional processor soldered into cartridges to make Star Fox run in pseudo 3D on the far more powerful Super Nintendo. Hummer Team, by contrast, achieved something comparable on weaker hardware, without any expansion chips, documentation or corporate support whatsoever. It was in every sense a technical miracle built from scraps of code, determination and pure audacity. As stated earlier, despite proudly bearing the title Tekken 2, the game Hummer Team produced has almost nothing to do with Namco's 1995 sequel. Every element from the roster to the stage design is pulled directly from the original Tekken of 1994. The title appears to have been chosen purely for marketing value. After all, bootleg publishers were never shy about exaggeration if it made a cartridge more eye-catching on a market stall. Released around 1996 under the banner of JY Company, who financed and distributed most of Hummer Team's work during their peak years, it stands amongst their most daring projects. What players actually received was a compact lineup of 8 fighters: Kazuya, Heihachi, Nina, Paul, Michelle, Law, King and Wang. To make the selection screen appear more impressive, the portraits were duplicated across 2 neat rows of 16 slots. It looks substantial until one realises that half of the roster were mere clones. Stranger still, selecting certain characters produced mismatched results. King loaded Heihachi, Law transformed into Paul, and a slot marked Julia mysteriously summoned Nina, a curiosity given that Julia Chang wouldn't appear in the official series until Tekken 3. These oddities weren't signs of incompetence so much as the inevitable ghosts of recycled code. Hummer Team frequently layered new data atop their old frameworks, and now and then the seams showed. As you can see, once the bouts begin, the results are quite astonishing. The arenas are faithful miniatures of their arcade counterparts. One moment you're brawling beneath a shimmering skyline, the next you're trading blows before an ancient temple. The audio work is equally audacious. Much of the soundtrack consists of simplified renditions of Tekken's original stage themes, yet attentive ears will notice something unexpected. Paul's theme borrows heavily from Fear Factory out of Donkey Kong Country, a tune that fits so well it almost sounds intentional. It's clear that Hummer Team sourced music from wherever they could find, stitching together fragments of existing compositions into something oddly coherent. Elsewhere, the ending theme is lifted directly from Kart Fighter, subtly linking Tekken 2 NES to its spiritual ancestors. These artifacts expose the team's working method. Nothing was ever built entirely from scratch, but rather assembled as a patchwork of recycling. Yet, from this Frankenstein monster of programming emerged a functioning fighting game. Chaotic, clunky, and astonishingly alive on a console that should never have been able to contain it. Booting up Tekken 2 for the NES, one quickly discovers that Hummer Team's interpretation of Namco's intricate fighting system has been drastically simplified, yet remains surprisingly faithful in spirit. The controls are stripped to their essence, the A button punches, the B button kicks, and a handful of directional combinations still trigger advanced moves. Astonishingly, quarter circle motions actually work, allowing for special attacks that resemble PlayStation counterparts, even if their execution feels more like wizardry than precision. Movement, however, has a personality all of its own. Fighters dash at breakneck speed, but walk as if wading through treacle, producing a rhythm that feels both frantic and sluggish all at once. Jumps and characters soaring in graceful arcs before they crash back down like bowling balls hurled from a rooftop. Every landing hit causes absurd knockback, sending opponents skidding halfway across the stage. Traditional combos are almost impossible. The fighters bounce off one another like bumper cars, but every strike lands with a comical sense of weight. And yet, despite the jank, there's an undeniable charm to it all. The input response is sharp, and for a bootleg brawler running on 8-bit hardware, the gameplay holds together remarkably well. Even two-player mode functions reliably, allowing both combatants to share the chaos without reducing the frame rate to a crawl. So yes, you'll be booting Kazuya across the stage, watching the game occasionally decide that gravity is optional, but you'll still be quietly astonished that it runs at all. It's an experience caught somewhere between technical marvel and a fever dream, proof that even when pushed to absurd extremes, the NES refuses to die without a fight. When placed alongside the rest of Hummer Team's fighting game catalogue, Tekken 2 represents the apex of their peculiar craft. By the time of its release, the studio had spent years refining the same internal engine, each new project a slightly more sophisticated riff on the last. Among the pantheon of unlicensed fighters, Tekken 2 isn't merely impressive for what it is, it's genuinely good. It may not rival its 32-bit namesake, but within the grey market underworld of retro gaming, it remains one of the most accomplished and unexpectedly competent titles ever made. But regardless of what you or I think, in the end, Tekken 2's legacy lies not in its commercial success or critical acclaim, but in the simple fact that it exists. A playable contradiction, a relic from a time when passion and piracy were often indistinguishable. For every perfectly manufactured title that bore Nintendo's seal of quality, there were works like this, scrappy, ingenious, and fueled by the rebellious energy of people who refused to accept what their hardware could and couldn't do. Don't forget, as of now, that you can experience all of the classic Marvel vs. Capcom sprite-based brawlers together in one epic collection of modern hardware for next to nothing. Using my links, you can grab it for a whopping 54% off the usual price. And while you're there, don't miss out on discounts of up to 90% on thousands of more games, including all the big fighting games of the era. So treat yourself, click the links below, and I'll see you all again soon. Cheerio!